We're going to talk about what's going on in Syria, because I'm sure you've been wondering. Not. Most people really haven't been thinking about Syria a whole lot, except for how it relates to the war in Israel. So we're going to cover what the Trump administration is looking to do with Syria, why it may or may not be a great idea, what the consequences could be of that. We have Americans in Rojava over there in Syria. We have them right down in Deir ez-Zor and a place called Al-Tanf, which is up in further north. They are special operations forces, Army Rangers mostly. They rotate through there, and they have been since 2017, or well, before that even, 2015. And they're just playing whack-a-mole. And when the terrorists raise their ugly heads, they figure out where some leadership is trying to reconstitute, they go out there and they take them out. It's just continuous low boil of hatred and terrorism that's coming out of that region. Now, here's the thing. A memo came out from the Trump administration just in the last few days, directed the Pentagon to come up with a plan to remove all 2,000 U.S. troops that are in Syria, to bring them home within the next 30, 60, or 90 days. They're supposed to come up with a plan to do this. Donald Trump does not like to have U.S. troops on foreign soil. It's risky, it's expensive, and he sees that as less a projection of American power globally and more an indication that we're involved in forever wars. I can see the arguments on both sides for this one here in Syria. Because if we start to talk about what will happen if the United States pulls out of Syria completely, there will not be anybody there to keep playing whack-a-mole on these terrorists. The Kurds will likely get their hands full being attacked by Turkey, because Turkey does not like the Kurds and they want the Kurds out of there. So you see this yellow section, this strip up here at the top, that's Turkish forces that have already pushed in and pushed out the Kurds in that portion of Rojava. That used to be purple. I've been in that area. I've been all along that border on my trips to Syria. And I was there when the fighting was happening against the Kurds by Turkey. Now, as you know, Turkey is a NATO ally, but they are not our friend. They have tremendously radicalized in the last 10 years under the leadership of President Erdogan. He is straight up Muslim Brotherhood. Unfortunately, he's a strong man, and Donald Trump likes people that project strength. And he thinks that we should be friends with Turkey. That's a mistake. He doesn't like the idea of having 2,000 troops forever in Syria. And that, I understand. I can see his point there. Because there's no real end game right now in eastern Syria. The best thing that could happen would be for it to be recognized as Kurdistan. It belongs to the Kurds now. The United States says the Kurds have the full backing of the U.S. military, so don't mess with them. And let the Kurds administer that area. If they did that, in 5 years, you could take your family to eastern Syria on vacation and be perfectly safe. Because the Kurds are reasonable people, they're friendly to America, and besides Israel, they're our best ally in the whole region. The Trump administration has made some noises in that direction, but they've also contradicted themselves. They have said specifically to Turkey, don't mess with the Kurds or else. But then Trump says, oh, I like Erdogan. I think Erdogan should be doing what he needs to do. It sort of sends mixed messages. When I was in Syria on one of my trips, Donald Trump was president at that time, and he put out this tweet right here. Almost 3 years, but it is time for us to get out of these ridiculous, endless wars, many of them tribal, and bring our soldiers home. We will fight where it is to our benefit and only fight to win. Turkey, Europe, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Russia, and the Kurds will now have to, and then he goes on. Okay, but that's the part I wanted to highlight. I was in Syria when the U.S. troops started to pull out of northeastern Syria. When the Trump administration decided to pull out of Turkey, it caused great consternation because the Syrian army was still a thing under Assad, and they wanted to take back that part of Syria. There's a lot of oil in that area, and Turkey immediately started attacking the Kurds as soon as they started to pull out. They ended up taking the troops back in there because it got real skippy between Turkey and the Kurds. And you could tell that a regional war was about to break out in that area, and that the United States troops that had been there were kind of a diluting factor. It's like Turkey is gasoline and the Syrian army under Assad was kerosene, and the caliphate people left there were napalm, and they were all kind of in that area. The only thing throwing water on all that to keep it from going up in a giant funeral pyre was the United States troops that were in the area. So you pull the United States troops out, that place kicks off. Well, very little has changed except for the fact that it's now not the Assad regime, it's the new Syrian regime under al-Jilani, but it's still a Syrian army and they still would like to take that back. The Kurds are still being threatened from the north. Turkey would love nothing more than to roll in there and just decimate the Kurds. So it is not looking good for Kurdistan, for Rojava. Because if Trump decides to pull out all 2,000 troops that we have there, you can virtually be guaranteed that the Turks and the new Syrian group will punch in there. The Kurds will not be able to hold those camps anymore, and all 10,000 caliphate members will be set free at once. They will immediately set to work rebuilding their caliphate with the help of Turkey again, and maybe even the help of the new Syrian military, because al-Jilani was al-Qaeda at one point. Now, why is this not necessarily the worst thing that could happen? That doesn't sound like a real promising idea on its face. Pull all those U.S. troops out and just let the whole place go up in smoke. But let's think about it a little more long term. If we did that and just sort of let it burn, right now, the new Syrian military under Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is what they call themselves. They are actually engaged in a hot war, real combat with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been trying to push into Syria and take parts of Syria, and HTS, using leftover Syrian tanks, has been pushing Hezbollah back into Lebanon, engaging in massive firefights that go on for days. And so what should the United States do about that? Should we take a side, or should we just kind of sit back and get our popcorn out and let it happen? I say let's just watch. Those guys will kill each other off for a while. Wait and see what comes out of that. It seems on its face it might not be a great idea to let 10,000 Caliphate black pajama boys out of their camps and let them free again. But here's the problem. What else are we going to do with these guys? Are we going to keep troops there and pay for their care? Because the U.S. is actually paying the Kurds, giving them money to care for these black pajama guys. Are we going to do that forever? Because these black pajama people are doing very little except breed right now. They're having lots and lots of kids. And of course, they are radicalizing their kids because they don't have much else to do. Not a lot of TV in the camps. And so if we pull everybody out and the Kurds open up those camps and set those guys free, many of those people are certified air thieves, really, should be taking a dirt nap and should have taken their dirt nap a long time ago. But if you set them free and they go back to their dastardly deeds, then you have a good excuse. And so perhaps by pulling our troops out, we set the stage to eventually wipe the slate clean of these black pajama boys. Or maybe, if we're lucky, HTS or the Turks or the Kurds or somebody will do it for us. And we won't have to. A lot of people say Donald Trump is crazy, but I think a lot of people are starting to see he might be just crazy like a fox. And if it comes to having troops out in some godforsaken forward operating base in Syria for the rest of our lives till my grandchildren are serving in the military, or pulling out, letting the whole thing catch fire and burn itself out over the next few years, while it will certainly result in some serious suffering and a reorganization of the Syrian backdrop, maybe that's the best thing to do. Maybe, maybe not.